Hi, I'm Scarlett Johnson, and I am a candidate for Mequon-Thiensville School District. And here's my Facebook Live. I know I'm starting late, but had a lot to do. Hopefully, there's not too much background noise. I have kids doing homework and watching TV in the background. I'll get started quickly. There's a lot that I wanted to talk about, and today's a good day to do it. Tomorrow I get to go, my husband got tickets, so I'm going to go see Jordan Peterson downtown. So I'm really excited about that. He's great. So I wanted to start off with a quote that I love from Abraham Lincoln. I am not bound to win, but I am bound to be true. I am not bound to succeed, but I am bound to live up to the light that I have. I must stand with anybody that stands with right, and stand with him while he is right, and part with him when he goes wrong. Another few quotes that I just love by Marva Collins. And if you don't know who Marva Collins is, you need to look her up. Look it up on YouTube. She's amazing, and she inspired me, undergraduate, graduate. I quoted her often. She is a teacher whose success at educating poor Black students earned her enormous accolades, and she was even considered to be a Secretary of Education under Ronald Reagan. And she's just amazing. And if you are very passionate about education, I really suggest that you read some of her works. But she said, when someone is taught the joy of learning, it becomes a lifelong process that never stops. A process that creates a logical individual. That is the challenge and the joy of teaching. So relevant to our conversation today, she also said, there is a lot of money to be made from miseducation. From the easy to read, easy to learn textbooks, workbooks, teacher manuals, educational games, and visual aids. And she said this probably 40 years ago. Back then, it was the textbook business. So she said the textbook business is more than $1 billion a year industry, and some of its biggest profits come from audio-visual aids, flashcards, tape cassettes, and film strips. She said, no wonder the education industry encourages schools to focus on surface education. So 40 or 50 years ago, that's what she thought was surface education. Back then, it was the textbook business. What business in the education industry, what business profits most now? What is a surface level business that is now a multi-billion-dollar business in education? And I think we all know it's equity, SEL, consultants, coaches, the fad trends in education. They don't do this stuff for free. There's a lot of money to be made in this business. And we always have to remember that. And this isn't, while teachers often feel that they are undervalued and underpaid, a lot of these coaches, they're making six figures and they have pretty nice lifestyles. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. And one more quote from Marva Collins that I have to put in. Students do not need to be labeled or measured any more than they already are. They don't need more federal funds, grants, and gimmicks. What they need from us is common sense, dedication, and bright, energetic teachers who believe that all children are achievers and who take personally the failure of any one child. And I just think that's a really beautiful sentiment. Over the last 2 years, I have immersed myself in issues related to education. I spend time talking to educators, both current and retired, all who have dedicated many years to education. And in so doing, my esteem for the profession has only grown. I have so many questions, and I'm always looking for answers. And I could talk for hours. Ask anyone who talks to me. I'll just, get my notebook and a lot of questions. And I think, wouldn't it be wonderful for those who always are on the attack of people like myself? What if they took the time to be curious and ask me questions and ask those who have opinions different from them, ask them questions. Seek answers. I mean, am I crazy to believe that there are more people in this world that see problems and want to address them rather than just attack and vilify others, the ideas of others? So one question to ask ourselves, especially in background themes, is how to bridge divides. And I found something really interesting. So often conversations between people on different sides of a contentious issue are unsuccessful because both parties tend to immediately focus on their differences rather than their similarities. So I have come to believe that there is an incentive to polarize often. Those who protect the status quo have much to gain by keeping us apart and suspicious of each other. So I think there's much to gain by keeping parents and teachers apart and suspicious of each other. But who will gain from that? And that's something to think about. Who gains if parents and teachers aren't partners? Dividers keep us hyper-focused on differences. They divide us in many ways. Lately, of late, a lot by skin color, by status, by many different ways. But we don't have to take the bait. Instead, we can begin having productive conversations with others right now by focusing on where we are like-minded. And by taking this approach, we can develop a new and deepening respect for one another. And realizing that even our so-called opponents have honest intentions, just like you. They just simply see the world differently. This is something I said yesterday in the office hours. There was somebody that just was very upset about a lot of issues, and I simply said, that's your perspective. There are others. I have a different perspective. I see and hear a completely different perspective than yourself. And when I said that, this person was like, okay, yeah, I guess you're right. And I think that's often the way we need to look at things, that you can't live in an echo chamber. And I believe that the biggest problem with this coalition, and for those of you who aren't in Mequon, there's a group, and I've kind of called them the coalition of mean girls because they just so viciously attack me personally in every way, the way that I look, the way that I talk. It's pretty terrible, to be honest. But overall, this group serves as a mouthpiece for the administration, in my opinion. And so there's just some contention there, and I think that rather than seek to build bridges, there's just been a lot of attacking, and I would like to see something different. So let's talk about equity. This is a subject that I've done a lot of research on over the last 2 years, and equity and the philosophy that surrounds it, there's nothing new to this. There's absolutely nothing new. I know we often use critical race theory. That's Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, and then we have Gloria Ladson Billings, Madison professor emeritus who wrote The Foundations of Critical Race Theory in Education, basically how to apply the legal scholarship of Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw and adapt it into K through 12 education. So she wrote the book on it, literally, and she continues to lecture. In fact, I sat through a lecture of hers just 2 weeks ago, and she was hired by the Wisconsin DPI to discuss critical race pedagogy, and she slipped a few times and said critical race theory. I think realizing it's not a popular term right now, so we're going to call it culturally relevant teaching, critical race pedagogy. There's a lot. Now it's kind of merging into social emotional learning. So these terms are always changing because when enough people kind of catch on to what's happening, you have to kind of change the language quickly because parents get very upset. And in books like Leading for Social Justice, written by Elise Ventura and Colleen Capper, who are the founders of ICS for Equity. That's the firm that Mequon Thiensville hired when they started their equity project. Here's the book. You can see I read it. They have a very exhaustive plan that takes about 5 or 6 years to implement. It starts with an equity audit. You go to equity non-negotiables, Whitefish Bay, Shorewood, Middleton, Elmbrook started, but then backed off. Germantown nearly started, then backed off. So there's a whole list of districts that used ICS for equity, and some are farther along than we are, and you can see some of the disastrous consequences that stem from using their framework. And so today, equity has come to mean the opposite of equality. Ibram X. Kendi, the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, says this about equity. The defining question is whether the discrimination is creating equity or inequity. If discrimination is creating equity, then it is anti-racist. If discrimination is creating inequity, then it is racist. Someone reproducing inequity by permanently assisting an overrepresented racial group into wealth and power, this is whiteness, is entirely different than someone challenging the inequity by temporarily assisting an underrepresented racial group into relative wealth and power until equity is reached. This is where his famous comment comes up. The only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. Again, the only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. This violates all the tenets of the civil rights movement, of Martin Luther King Jr. It turns equality on its head, that statement alone. And this is what equity is. The real meaning of it. Now there's educational equity, but at its root, this is what equity is. I challenge, if you have a lot of time and you want to go down a bunch of wormholes, just type in equity, go to the DPI website, Wisconsin DPI website, and type in equity, and just start clicking. And you'll find studies, look up culturally relevant teaching, and then go read through their whole document, go to the end, check the sources they cite, then start to look at those. You will go down some of the rabbit holes I have, and you'll see that this definition that Ibram X. Kendi provides is the actual definition of equity. And we're often told the way that it looks in our school is totally different, but this is a term in education is rooted. This is what equity is rooted in. I do not support the implementation of policies, curriculum, and professional development that are ideological in nature and meant to achieve an ideological agenda. Children are not to be used to achieve what Thomas Sowell called the vision of the anointed. They should be taught how to think, not what to think. All individuals must have equal opportunities to participate in and benefit from the district's programs so that every stakeholder can benefit from the MTSD equity equal opportunity policies. MTSD should ensure that every single student is seen, heard, and valued as a singular personality, as an individual, as a unique child, to me, of God, not simply a representative of a monolithic identity group. So I'm going to post this later, but in Elmbrook schools, there is ICS has, many different slides. And in one of the slides, this is a statement being made under their C3 plan. Elmbrook schools are responsible for creating a system in which success for all students is accessible through a representative and inclusive curriculum that decenters whiteness and prioritizes prioritizes marginalized communities in all subjects. Decenters whiteness. Now, I would try to kind of delve deep into what whiteness is, but that will just make this super long. Whiteness is about the whole capitalist system, our constitutional order, rule of law. It is everything that is all the foundational principles of America and the West. That's whiteness. That's what they want to decenter. That's what's bad. So I do not agree with that. Now, there's something very extensive written, I have run, that an ICS equity handbook, and it was written by a friend, a parent, and a professor at University of Madison. So I'll go through, he's extremely intelligent. And he really delved into ICS and spent a great deal of time unpacking it. And he said the goal of ICS is not rigor or academic excellence or basic competencies, but rather to increase the number of school graduates who feel a sense of belonging to our greater society. In translation, rigor, academics, that's not important. It's, does your child feel good about himself? That is the sense of belonging. There's also leading for social justice, transforming schools and transforming kids into, in my opinion, activists, social justice activists, kids that will go out in the world and in a very political manner. There's, I could find lots of quotes where a lot of these thinkers believe that teaching is a political act. And that is not, when you talk to your regular teachers, when you talk to the teachers in your life, they do not feel that way. This is more of a higher order. This is sort of the contention of the consultant class. And the consultant class will come in and really just pound these ideas into teachers, that this is what you're to do. Monitor, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. So, and professional development acts in the same way, and DPI, trainings and seminars. It's just this just everywhere you go, like putting this pressure upon educators that this is the right way, this is what you need to do. The impact on teaching is significant. And I think at the office hours I was at yesterday, and often when I'm in conversations with parents across the political spectrum, whether I'm in Mequon-Thiensville, I'm outside of Mequon-Thiensville, I'm even outside of the state talking to parents and grandparents, there's a common theme, and that is that there's something different. There's been a real change, some say even over the last 10 years, but definitely since about 2015, 2016. And from what I can tell, advanced remedial and special needs programs have been discouraged and diminished significantly. Curriculum is now vertically aligned to push social justice and promote more activism and kind of, I guess, a lot of identity issues, a lot of identity politics. So teachers are pressured to conform. Curriculums become one size fits all with minor modifications so as to appear the learning is differentiated, when in fact it is really not that differentiated. In fact, student choices are limited. Teachers are often denied aids. Instead, they are provided coaches, coordinators, consultants, whatever you want to call them. I know there's been a lot of debate, but I think we get the general idea. These are folks who come in and they're not teaching to the children, they are more teaching to the teacher, and they are advising, consulting, watching, and teachers across the board have said, I would prefer an aide. I would prefer a para. I would prefer to have PD that focuses on literacy, on math, not sort of these other things. And often teachers will say, they're not really telling me anything I don't already know. Especially, I've been teaching for 10 years, 12 years, 16 years. I could teach them something, actually, but that's the way it is right now. So teachers are now required to be all things: general ed, special ed, accelerated. ICS for Equity de-emphasizes knowledge and the development of skills that most people expect from schools. The inevitable decline in competencies and ability will first be masked, but eventually the decline can be obscured no longer. The district will begin avoiding and downplaying some scores while focusing on other subjective scores. Altering grading methods, lowering standards will provide students with inflated grades that do not translate into significant growth when tested. That's MAP ACT forward. This is just spot on. This piece that I'm reading is just, they could, you might as well just put MTSD right in, and they could be talking about us, but they're talking about many different districts in Wisconsin and across the country. Okay, this is happening all over. So in our district, the use of tutors does further help to obscure the decline wrought by the Equity Project. And if you live in Mequon, Thiensville, you know many parents who use tutors, or you are using one yourself, or several, to help get your kids at grade level in math, in reading, or to improve their ACT scores. There are a lot of kids that have an A, they're 95%, and then the MAP test shows that they are they're in the middle, or their ACT, when they take the ACTs as a junior year, they discover that, wait, the grades are here, they're pretty high, but the scores for ACT, there's something off here. What could that be? So to go on, in this model, the school board is a support mechanism, but does not have top-down authority. It is actually at the bottom of the heap, wrapped around the central office as support. This is directly kind of out of the Leading for Social Justice book. Leaders for ICS and social justice, this is a direct quote from the book, Leading for Social Justice, may boldly take the lead in some ways to engage in autocratic leadership to move the school out of the quagmire of failure. Autocratic leadership. One former educator and administrator who worked with ICS said, "The goal under ICS is to neuter the school board so as to ensure that the board will rubber stamp all the initiatives of the consultants, the educrats, and technocrats in the administration who are pushing the ICS agenda." I think that just says it all. I want to say it one more time, because this is why I'm running. And this is why I'm very passionate about this. This is very difficult to run for school board. This is a lot of my time, a lot of my energy. A lot is asked of my family. I think Brian Shimmy had said, you don't get rich running for school board. As a matter of fact, you get into debt. And that's true. So I'm going to say this one more time. One former educator and administrator who worked with ICS said, "The goal under ICS is to neuter the school board so as to ensure the board will rubber stamp all the initiatives of the consultants and technocrats and educrats in the administration who are pushing the ICS agenda." Mic drop. Let's talk about science. While not explicitly endorsed in the ICS handbook, Elise Fertura and Colleen Camper have often called for teaching that is aligned with a CRT social justice viewpoint, as this is the only good teaching. As such, an ICS district will likely switch to something called the Next Generation Science Standards. The National Association of Scholars has published a comprehensive report on this anti-science, anti-reason, and anti-rigor science standard from the NIS report directly. The Next Generation Science Standards have done more to degrade American K-12 science education than any other education reform in the last generation. And education reformers who dislike rigor and rich content dislike any proper science education, because scientific reasoning cannot be taught without rigor and rich content. Equity is kind of started with the humanities, and you think of, what do you think of sort of social justice activism? You think maybe in the history department or the English department. This is moving to science now. What about math? In a pre-calculus textbook there was a bar graph labeled Measuring Racial Prejudice by Political Identification. Now, this was not as far as I know, in an MTSD handbook. This was in a Pearson handbook. There are algebra textbooks that use math lessons to focus on politics, including racial bias and ethnic diversity in the United States. So an algebra book that uses math lessons that focus on politics. And you wonder why parents want curriculum transparency. So just 2 weeks ago, I sat through a series by Deborah McKnight, who worked for the San Francisco School District for many years. You know, that district in which 4 members, I believe, were recalled by 70-odd%, that district. Read about that. If you don't know about it, read about it. Read about what was going on in that district in San Francisco and how they were gutting math and science and just decimating rigor and destroying the future of the students that lived in that area. It got so bad that even in San Francisco, there was this very successful recall of many board members who just were very radical. We're not experiencing anything like that here in Mequon, but I don't know why Wisconsin DPI would bring a person who was a part of the carnage that happened in San Francisco, brought that into our district. I mean, not into our district, into our state. And you know, I would imagine she wasn't doing that for free. So she discussed a lot interest convergence, and interest convergence is discussed at great lengths in many texts. I've got a couple here, but when it comes to critical race theory, it's a central tenet. And it is a powerful tool, quote unquote, to disrupt and dismantle whiteness and create a change in our system. There were quotes around the fact of amplify interest convergence as a powerful tool to fundamentally dismantle American systems. Many radicals were cited throughout this DPI talk as part of the network's equity series. This is free, anyone can sign up for it. One was Audre Lorde. And Audre Lorde is famous for the quote, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." To say that Audre Lorde was not a fan of free markets and capitalism is an understatement. She was an ardent Marxist. I was appalled that she was quoted in this lecture series, quite honestly. Then at the very end, the discussion ended on decolonizing math, deconstructing math. One statement that was made several times is, well, everyone knows that pre-algebra was the invention of racist white parents. Again, pre-algebra was the invention of racist white parents, according to Deborah McKnight. Then there was statements along the lines of math is in actuality a tool of white supremacy. It serves as a gatekeeper. Throughout this, many of the participants referred to consultants and educators as allies and co-conspirators. That's something you'll hear a lot if you sit through these, allies and co-conspirators. I was left with the question of how exactly do we decolonize math? That wasn't answered. But I'm guessing it's by eliminating rigor and accelerated learning, arguing that there are other ways of knowing. 2 plus 2, this is a statement that was actually made by a PhD professor. 2 plus 2, hey, it may not equal 4, maybe it equals 5. There are other ways of knowing. I certainly do not want to live in a house built by someone who thinks 2 plus 2 is 5. So there was this final statement, and I won't say who made it, but when you sit in these lectures, and they're through Zoom, and there's anywhere between 50, 60, 70, sometimes 80 people online. One statement that was typed in the chat at the end was this, and this is an educator in Wisconsin. That is exactly how I'm using CRT in my research, by advocating for the incorporation of interests, trends present in youth culture to decolonize science as a subject. And I want to fundamentally transform how it's taught in K-12 and its texts. I am very concerned about the state of education in America. These are just snippets of all the data and the research and the different quotes that I've collected. I think America is the greatest country in the world. I do. And I am thankful every day that I was born here. This is the only country in the world where someone like me, a kid born to a 14-year-old unmarried woman, Puerto Rican, had an 8th grade education, that I could be where I am now. This doesn't happen everywhere. If you traveled the world, you would know. If you talk to a lot of people, you would know. It doesn't happen everywhere. It doesn't. In most countries, the station you are born in is the one that you will die in. There is no movement. There is so much opportunity here. And that's evidenced by all the people who are doing everything they can just to have a chance, just to provide their children a chance at freedom, liberty, to move up the ladder of economics, to go from dirt poor to someone who's thriving and who can live a lifestyle free of want. There's too many in education right now who are determined to tell the American youth that the American system is something that that we should be ashamed of, that has to be torn down and remade. Of course, America isn't perfect. Of course, there is a tragic past that we must teach and understand. Absolutely. However, there is also triumph. I don't agree that a very political and ideological message is suitable, especially to very young children. And it's younger and younger. I think the kids are too impressionable. Unlike Paulo Freire, author of Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Elise Fritteur's favorite book, and also quoted when our district paid $42,000 for Blacksmith Consulting to provide us a lecture on race and privilege, in which we were shown a scale by which we should assess how racist we are, and then told we should read White Fragility, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and a book written by a avowed Marxist who admired Mao Zedong, Paulo Freire. That's that often quoted and revered. Don't know why. But I think radical and polarizing political ideology should remain outside the school doors. And I know that the majority of parents agree with me, and the majority of teachers do as well. A recent survey found that 81% of voters said public schools should teach the idea that America was founded on the ideals of freedom, equality, and self-governance. This is the opposite of what those who sort of peddle the equity game right here, that's the opposite of what they'll tell you. So in about 2016, as Paul Bazell proudly told us, he was there, he helped to usher in the Equity Project. And that's when MTSD began to slowly start setting aside rigor and academics in favor of some of the things that I've discussed today. This has resulted in declining academics and declining enrollment. So now let's talk about declining enrollment. Despite the fact that Mequon-Thiensville continues to experience population growth, I believe we've grown over 2,000 over the last 10 years according to Census Bureau data, our enrollment numbers are in decline. 7% decline in enrollment over just the last 2 years, that's 263 students. And if you know how our budget, what our funding formula is, a decline in resident enrollment means that we have less money to spend on education, and we will have more problems with our budget, and it will be more difficult to balance it, and it will be more difficult to provide services to students, and that will result in lower education scores, that will make our district less desirable to move in, and that will lower our property values. Overall decline in enrollment began before the pandemic. It did. MTSD predictions of growth were drastically miscalculated. The elementary school enrollment projected in 2020 was 1,636. The actual number was 1,461. Taxpayers relied on this projection when they voted in favor of a $55.7 million referendum. So all of this, so even before the pandemic, so in 2015, we added a K-4 class. We added a whole other class. And that has increased our enrollment by 150 to 186 students. Despite that, despite adding a whole nother class, we added a whole nother class, the K-4 program in 2015. We are still experiencing a decline, and we have experienced a decline over the years. How did enrollment decline as how did the enrollment decline as population increased and as we added a K-4 program? How is the board and the administration dealing with this? Based on what I can see from 2 years of attending board meetings, they aren't. They don't talk about it. Only recently have we discussed it because we now have to disrupt a lot of families, but because we have to redraw our boundaries for three elementary schools. Now, candidate Paul Bazell mansplains this issue on TikTok. And his brother-in-law, Jason Lavish, a recent resident of Mequon-Thiensville, tries to convince us that he's not just another bureaucrat in education. But despite attempts to obfuscate, the truth cannot be ignored. As a result of poor planning, students will be disrupted by having to transfer schools to prevent one from exceeding capacity. I just learned on Monday that in order to balance our budget, which would have been off drastically, in order to save $600,000, it's called FTE reductions. 6 teachers who are resigning or retiring, the positions of 6 teachers in our district will not be replaced. We will not hire teachers to replace the 6 who are leaving. That is a loss of 6 teachers. We are experiencing academic, we are now trying to address academic decline, and we are engaging in an academic recovery initiative. I believe the success of this initiative will be severely compromised by losing 6 teachers, and I do not think we should be balancing our budget on the backs of teachers. And this, I do not think I'm alone in this. And I also believe that what they said was that, well, okay, we don't need these teachers because as we redraw these boundaries, we're going to be able to shift kids into classes. So basically, if your child is in a elementary school and you like that there's maybe only 18 kids in the class, well, that's going to change next year. They're going to have to increase the sizes of those classes. And I think we added additions to buildings, we built new classrooms, and instead of adding teachers, we are subtracting 6 teachers. I was hoping we were going to add a few more teachers. I was hoping that we might add some aides and paraprofessionals. This is what the teachers would like. This is what they need. I thought, these resignations and attritions were recently kind of blamed on me, but as a matter of fact, that's not true. And the district looks at these resignations and these retirements as a way to save money. I think that there exists a group, whether it's the coalition or not, that seems to be the mouthpiece of the MTSD administration. Their lack of concern for parents has been clear from day one. The coalition does not really care about parents, only certain parents. But their complete disregard for teachers, that's new. Apparently losing 6 teachers isn't important. Class sizes don't matter either. Disruption of families, oh, kids are resilient. This is good for them. Declining enrollment isn't a problem. Empty classrooms, not a problem. Hey, maybe there is more room to hire consultants who don't teach kids, but follow around teachers and make reports on them. I guess the coalition thinks teachers love watching MTSD and admin I guess the coalition thinks MTSD loves watching teachers be subtracted while adding administrators. There are a lot of questions that must be answered, but they won't be if you elect the candidates handpicked by the same folks who made the miscalculations, the beneficiaries of the status quo. I would like to say that I am deeply concerned about the loss of students in the district and how it will impact our funding. I am concerned that enrollment has decreased by 7%, and I am concerned that the $55 million referendum was predicated on projections for student enrollment, which were way off target. The district needs to be more accountable to taxpayers who relied on these numbers to approve the referendum. Half of our property taxes are applied to the school district, and MTSD should be making more of an effort to not only bring back all these families, but attract more. I'm going to end with this because I think that we're going on for a little while. You will, each of you, have the chance to matter. You will see things happen that you know to be wrong, where you find that the standard line is actually a lie. If you are listening to this, you have probably found yourself there already, like I have. I looked at my children knowing I am their best defense in this world. I saw injustice. I saw things and heard things that caused my mind to race. As my son would say when he was young, my spidey senses went off. I second guessed myself, but then I leaned in because my heart knew I had something to say. And when this happens to you, don't just sit there. Listen, learn, and act. I've lived a very unique and diverse life. And when I look back on it, it occurs to me that the decisions of which I am most proud are not the ones, they're not the times when I looked the other way. Those are my most regrettable moments. It's when I did what was right. That's the good stuff. Overcoming that overwhelming sense of fear and doubt to charge ahead and say to yourself, come what may. Those are the moments of magic when you literally can feel the wonder of being alive. Because in that brief moment, and I'm going to use a quote, the exquisite joy of not being anyone's subject, when I had the unmistakable sense that I have existed for a purpose, that I stood the chance of leaving the world better than I found it. You don't get any of that through doing what anyone tells you to do, even whatever group, whatever coalition, whatever force in your life that's just telling you to conform. Going along to get along, marching in lockstep with people who would turn on you and unleash their vitriol in your direction the very second you weren't a team player. The establishment plays for keeps. So speak with truth publicly, with care and with clarity. And that's what I've tried to do. And that's what I will always try to do. And I'll end this with this. As a mom, I'm on the front lines every day. I deal with all the challenges that our children face. I understand kids have a wide range of ability, and each one is unique and require different supports. I will work hard to support all students. I am not an administrator or a past board member, and I think that's a good thing. I think our board needs some diversity and a fresh perspective, not more of the same. And that's what I hope to provide, something different. If you want something different, choose someone different, and choose somebody that isn't beholden to this. Pick someone who's going to ask the tough questions and who will put students first, will view teachers as partners. And that would be me, Scarlett Johnson, and I hope that I can continue to earn your vote on April 5th. And early voting begins March 22nd, and that's coming up soon. I think absentee ballots are going to be mailed out as early as next week. So, and my website is www.scarlettforkids.com. And I have a whole bunch of videos on my YouTube channel, and I'll turn this one. And I'm sorry for the background noise, but I have 4 kids in the house. My son's in medical school. He's not here right now, but sometimes he's here with his dog and all that. So it's a little, I hope there's not too much distracting noise, but I'm a mom and this is the way it is. So anyway, I hope you have a nice evening, and if you have any questions and you would like me to send, if you would like to see this research, if you would like to know where I pulled these quotes, happy to do it. I'm going to try and post some of this stuff tomorrow. I'm a little tired right now, but I've got tons of research, and I have worked with so many brilliant parents. I mean, doctors, lawyers, former educators, current educators, nurses, executives. There is such a team of concerned parents, or even some of them, their children, are grown, but they still care. They still care about their communities. They care about because these kids are our future. And we don't want them to be, we don't want our kids to view, use math in a way that's political. We want them to know and understand math so that they can become doctors and engineers and scientists. We want teachers that are free to, in their classroom, to be able to use some of their own judgment and to instill a love and a joy of learning. And when you're given a script and you're told don't veer from it, and then there's someone standing in the background with a pad of paper writing notes and going to go tell on you later, I mean, I wouldn't want to work in that kind of atmosphere. That doesn't sound like that's something. When I think a lot of teachers started because they love children and they love to teach and they want to, it brings them joy and they really care. And I think a lot of these fads, they just dehumanize everybody, not just the kids, not just the parents, but the teachers as well. And so I think that we need to reprioritize. And I said this, if you get one of my flyers, you will see refocus our priorities, refocus the board's priorities towards educational excellence, address learning loss, support curriculum transparency, fight for free thought, support all students, oppose property tax hikes. Who's like, I don't know how you could be against any of this. I think it's all common sense. So if you like common sense, then I'm your candidate. Okay. Have a good night, and you'll see me again soon. And I will be out again tomorrow canvassing and doing flyer drops. I'll be out all weekend. So maybe I'll see you. And hey, if you have a question, stop by and say hi. I was going to have office hours tomorrow, but there's another event that is occurring, so I'm going to adjust my office hours, and I'm going to try and really expand those next week. I go to Collectivo. I try and go between 9 and 11. So if you have anything that you'd like to ask me, I'll sit there with all my notes and my coffee and my avocado toast, and you can come and chat. So thank you all. Bye.